Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our advanced session for tonight. We'll be dealing with the topic of counterplay and counterattack. First of all, apologies from my side for running a few minutes late. I was caught in traffic and there was a major accident. Sincere apologies for being slightly delayed, and thank you to Michael for holding the fort. You guys might be wondering why the topic counterplay and counterattack. Is it not interlinked? Does it not mean the same thing? Right. We are talking about defense, and when tonight's lecture was advertised, we spoke about defense and counterattack. So I changed it to counterplay. Because one cannot be defending all the time. How one are going to be defending all the time? So there's just a couple of theory concepts that I will touch on before we go through the games itself. Under counterplay, the first concept that I want to be dealing with is the fact that, we have had previous lectures where we spoke about calculations, accurate so it's just a repeat tonight, whereby I'm reminding you once again that for calculations of variations, you must not just consider things from your own point of view. And this is where a lot of players tend to go wrong. They just tend to look at what I can do. What am I going to respond? What type of plan do I have in mind? It's just a I. You need to bear in mind that you are not alone in that game. All right? You need to bear in mind, and this is just some psychological advice that I'm giving you. You need to be more focused on your opponent than upon yourself. All right? So you need to preempt what your opponent is planning and not just look at the one possible option that your opponent could consider. You need to consider all possible responses from your opponent, who is also very much part of the game. Okay, the third point that I'm going to be touching on is that apart from outstanding tactical ideas for yourself, you need to also consider much simpler ideas for the opponent. Often we tend to get carried away. We spend 20, 25 minutes. We have time management problems during our game because we spend a lot of time going into a deep calculation of a possible variation that we could do. And then you spend all the time, and then you find that when it's your opponent's turn to play, your opponent makes a simple move, and bam, within the first or second or third move, you are stumped because you did not consider that simple move. Okay. The fourth point that I would want to talk about is the fact that you need to consider the best moves for your opponent all the time. All right. You need to be preemptive, look at all the possible variations, but consider the best moves for your opponent, not your best move, but the best move for your opponent. And you need to preempt what your response is going to be, because often, like I said, you had all this great plans, and then your opponent makes a simple move, and then you end up being in trouble. The final concept that I would want to touch on under counterplay is the fact that not only should you calculate long variations, okay, you need to look at calculating short variations and concentrate very hard during the first moves of a variation, because you might have overlooked something. Often you find that when you have calculated these long variations, within the first few moves of the variation, that is where a lot of mistakes tend to be made. Okay, and then later on we're going to be talking about counter attack. Is that when you are defending, it is necessary to do more than just simply to spot your opponent's threats. That's not good enough. Okay, you cannot be expecting to win a game if you're on the back foot all the time. I've had a few of those nightmare games in my time, so I think I know what I'm talking about. Okay, and it's not a nice feeling. And I'm not just talking about the fact that when you are playing black that this is going to be happening. Okay, we know that white has first advantage to attack, but it does not mean that if you are just playing black that you must be coming up with counter-attacking ideas. Similarly, when you're playing white as well. You need to exploit every opportunity to prepare a counter-attack. And this, guys, I cannot emphasize enough. All right? Often I tell my students, you need to do the checks, captures, and threats. Do the CCT process. You need to identify those weaknesses within your opponent's position, whether it is related to the development of their pieces, whether it is related to the structural problems that they have, pawn structures, whether it is related to the fact that the king is still stuck somewhere, or there's certain pieces that are offside. But weaknesses, if you identify weaknesses in your opponent's position, weaknesses create opportunities. In order to win the game, you're going to have to target weaknesses. Every opportunity position, now that you've actually identified the weakness, there you should start preparing a counter-attack. That's where you can come up with your plan A, plan B, plan C. We've spoken before about the theory of two weaknesses. So look for a counter-attacking plan at all times. Frequently, you also find that it is not an option to concentrate only on defending, because then you're going to actually allow your opponent's attack to develop too quickly. Your opponent, if he's attacking, he is not going to be running away and withdrawing his pieces. In fact, when you are attacking, the coach will always tell the students, increase the pressure. When you're attacking, attack more. So you need to prepare yourself that there is going to be some intensity happening within the game. So you need to come up with some counter plan there. You cannot just be wanting to defend all the time and say, yo, I'm a good defender. Defense all the time is not going to win you the game. Most of the time when you are defending and you're on the back foot for most of the game, you're going to tell yourself, gosh, I just hope I can come out with a draw. That's my best result that I'm going to be expecting. All right, so you need to come up with, and then the next one is an extremely important point. I cannot underemphasize this point, is that the fact that you need to have a strong tactical vision. All right, and having a strong tactical vision is even more important in defense than in attack. It does not mean players that if you are busy defending, that you need to be blind to possible tactics, albeit a fork, albeit a discovered attack. That's extremely important. You need to still look out for those tactics, and that could form part of your counter-attacking plan. Then the final concept under counter-attack is that you need to try to find the tactical ideas which are typical of a counter-attack. Sometimes your opponent did not keep track of that intermediate check that you might make. Look for some other intermediate moves and some counter-attacks or strikes. Okay, so those are the concepts that I'm going to be touching on. I'm just going to invite you, if you have any comments about what I've said, now, any comments that you want to raise? Feel free to do so. Feel free to raise your hand. Okay, on the screen. We're moving over to the first concept of sorry guys, can you see the screen? Just indicate in the chat if you can see the board that I'm sharing.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. So under these games that we're looking at now, for counterplay, the first thing is we're going to be looking at is working things out for your opponent, and then later on we will look at calculating short variations. Okay, so the first game is a game that was played between Yusupov and Nielsen. There's somebody that is busy drawing here with on the board. Thank you for removing that. Okay, so under the first game, it's a game that was played in 1979. I'm just going to run through very quickly. I'm not going to be closing down the moves because with the games that I'm going through tonight, you guys will actually see that there's quite a bit of annotations that I've inserted. Okay, and then when white plays e3, now the next move for black played b6, and it is considered to be a weak move. Is there anybody that wants to just talk to me about that? Why would you consider that to be a weak move if you were playing black?
Strike, and then the 8-1 is weak.
Just repeat that, Chiran.
Because he takes c4, he takes c5, then the 8-1 is an isolated.
Yeah, okay. Would you want to talk to me also about these, the open diagonal there? Would that create a weakness there?
Yes.
Okay, it might not be an immediate weakness because black still will have his light squared bishop, but pretty soon thereafter, then if once the bishop is exchanged, there will be a weakness. Okay, I'm just going to ask you guys, there's somebody whose camera is on for the sake of solving our network or data problems and so forth. Can you just make sure that you are switching off your camera and putting yourself on mute, please? Okay, so black played that. So now the next response was d5. Do you think that white should have exchanged on c5? Jiran mentioned about us exchanging earlier. Do you think he should have exchanged? Or is d5 a much better move? Any comment?
I don't think he should have exchanged because after d takes c5, he plays bishop takes c5 and you're helping black develop.
I agree with you, Rawan. Thank you. Remember also, I just want to see there's something in the chat. Yeah, Chiran says d5 is a better move. What you guys need to take into account is the fact that there's a spin on f6. So white is taking advantage of the pin. So once e takes d5, bishop takes on f6. If the queen decides to take on d5, suddenly you have that attack. Those strong white light squeeze control that I was referring to a short while ago, white. Okay, so let's see what happened. d6 was played. Even if e takes d5, there's also the other possibility of knight going to c3. All right, and after bishop to b7, then the knight will take on d5. Let's just look at that. It's just something that I put in there as an annotation, as a variation. So this would have happened. Knight takes, bishop takes, then your bishop takes f6, queen takes, and queen takes, and then knight c6. Okay, so it would have been very strong, a strong attack there. Okay, let me just go back to the d6 move. Like I said, knight on c3 would also have come out. So this is how it continued. Bishop to b5. There's the check, which is also extremely strong. Knight b to d7. Knight c3. Okay, and now let's just see from here onwards. If you look at after you will look at white. White actually was considering his chances taking his chances very seriously. So look at that center control and the pressure there on the f6 square. Okay. And what was bad, players, is the fact that earlier black played b6. So instead of the bishop ending up on b7, look where the bishop ends up on. All right, on the d7 diagonal. So that's also going back to why the b6 was considered to be a bit of a weakish move. Okay, and I'm just continuing from here on in. And there goes the diagonal. And interestingly enough, now you guys see that the king itself cannot be castling. So up till now, remember our topic is counterattack. Up till now, white has been the one that's been on the attack. Suddenly, after the king e7, now the rooks are connected, and white did not consider this move, king e7. He underestimated that move, and now you can see that the d6 pawn is well protected. Okay, white was only planning the castling move from where you would also then have queenside castled. So that's as far as what white was considering. Okay, the next move after king e7 was to castle, and then black made a brilliant move. And now suddenly this pawn is already far advanced. And now it's in the same file as the white king, so you can actually expect that there's some attack that's going to happen here. Okay, there's just also the note here that if black had to play the rook h to d8, then knight to g5 would have been very strong for white. Okay, following up with queen e4 check, queen to e6, and queen h4. Okay, any comment from anybody at this stage or any questions? Anybody? Okay, then I'll continue. So now F6 is played. There is the comment that's being made that Queen F6 would have been much better. And after that exchange, it would have been G takes F6. That would have happened and so forth. Okay, I see there's something in the chat. Let me just check. Okay, Chiran says that he's making room for E4. Okay, Chiran, are you talking about black or white to wanting to go to E4? Okay, Jiran says white wants to go to E4. Ravan, is there anything you wanted to say?
Not not really. I think it's a weird position that the king's gone to E7, but it looks very solid.
Okay, let's just roll forward a few moves. Queen to G3, G6, Rook H1, and now Knight. The Rook to C6. Weak move. The reason being, and the comment is that black was not paying attention here and fell into a trap. Okay, it sounds familiar. It sometimes happens to us in our own games. Okay, the correct move was that he should have played bishop to c6. That's what he should have played, but he unfortunately did not play that. I'm not going to go too deep into that move, into that variation now. So let's just look what happens next. Okay, there's a bit of a sacrifice there. What do you guys think about that knight d4 move? Bit of a surprise?
Yeah, I was going to say earlier that the knight seems to not have any squares.
Yeah. So that's why he took full advantage of the rook c6 weak move that was made. And definitely he's now going to lose the exchange or otherwise end up being without a queen. All right. And these are the opportunities that I said that we need to identify in our game when we're looking at the possible variations. Okay, queen to e5, and there's your intermediate check. I just want to see there's something in the chat now. Yeah, the knight pins the rook and the queen, Musongo says, definitely. Okay, and then bishop c6, and there's the e4 move coming up. Okay. Michael, can you hear me? Michael? Guys, just. Okay, Michael, can you just take over? I've just completed that first game. My computer's on the blink, the screen is on the blink here now. And I'm going to have to force stop and come back in again. Yeah. No. Just look at, I shared it there. The link is there in the lesson plan that I sent. Yeah, just tell them that I've just got a technical problem. My thing crashed now quickly. I'm just going to come back in again. All right. Thanks, bye.
Okay, I'm sure you all heard that. I don't know what's going on with Mr.
What's
Andrew.
that?
Let me just sort my life out here quickly. Okay, let me share my. Okay, let me take over. Yeah. Okay, can everyone see my screen fine?
Yep.
Okay,
All good.
thank you. Okay, so white has just played e4. Let's just take a moment to reassess this position. So, black is down a full exchange now after e4. So I presume black needs to find some way of getting counterplay. Yeah, he chooses to trade queens, which, okay, I think he feels his king is too weak and he's forced to do something of that sort. And all white needs to look to do is activate his rooks in this position, which, okay, he's already done. We can see there's clearly going to be an idea of him breaking with e5 in the future, maybe pushing the g pawn. There's lots of potential. And I mean, I think any relatively strong player would agree that white shouldn't have too much problems converting this. King e6 is played. Black tries to activate his king. g4. We get pawn to h5. Black looks to rip open the h file for his rook. G takes h5 gets played. Rook takes h5. Rook d2. White just wants to double up on the d file. Rook to h7 gets played. Pawn to f3, solidifying the e pawn. Again, preparing rook d1. There's not too much left in this game. g5 gets played. Rook d1. Rook d7. And okay, black now has lost all counterplay. Obviously, this lecture we're looking at counterplay, and here we see black is just curling up into a ball. And there's no way black is making any attempt to win. Now white does gain access to the h file, and he utilizes it. Rook h1. b5 gets played by black. Now black realizes all his pieces are passive. He tries to take some space on the queen side. Rook h8 gets played, infiltrating back row. b4, rook to e8 check. The king is forced to go to f7, and now rook c8. This is a really nice idea white shows. You're just throwing in the check on e8 first to force the black king to go slightly more passive before he gains a tempo on the bishop. Bishop b5, b3. All these positions you want to make luft for your king as quickly as possible. Again, this lecture's on counterplay. One of the only ways white can lose this game is by some back rank nonsense or something of that sort, which just stepping out of all of that as quickly as possible is always a nice idea. King e6 and a4. a4, again, he's creating space. Maybe this a pawn could be weak in the future. We can imagine after b takes a3, king b1, king a2, and he's just going to pick up the pawn. Bishop f1, rook f2, and that bishop is unfortunately trapped. So very nice game from white side. Very little hiccups. Does anyone have any thoughts on this game they would like to share? Or any key moments they thought might help other people better understand things? Let me just pull up the chat here. How do I do this? Okay, I don't think I've missed any messages. But yeah, this is a game by Yusupov against obviously Fries Nelson. No one's really heard of the guy playing black, so usually you can expect white to win in those situations. But okay, if there's no comments, we will move on to the next game. Okay, see someone saying dope game in the chat. Yeah, it was a really nice game. Okay, so in this game, I believe the starting position, yeah, it's black to play. And bishop takes h3 gets played. Now, okay, there's a nice orange dot there. Why is bishop takes h3 a mistake? And what is black counting on? Okay, sorry, there's a question about the previous game being asked. After a4, was there any way for black to save the bishop? It's actually a good question. I think he can just... yeah, I should have actually mentioned this. Sorry, this is me lacking something. Let me turn on my video as well so you can see my wonderful face. Only reason people are here, obviously. I don't think there is, because if he en passants on a3, can someone see what white plays here?
Doesn't he just play c4 and it's the same thing?
C4 traps the bishop. My philosophy, what I originally said, king b1, king a2 is probably still winning, but obviously trapping the bishop is a lot better. So I hope that answers all your questions. Jeron is complimenting my beauty in the chat. Appreciate it. But okay, let's get back to bishop takes h3. So we need to work out what is black's main idea behind bishop takes h3. Can somebody give me the main idea? Obviously, we're talking about what happens if just g takes h3. A very obvious move. Let's see.
Shouldn't it be queen g3 check?
Yeah, queen g3 check, and okay, this is falling, this is falling. There's probably a checkmate somewhere here. Okay, wait, I need to just, let me disable this waiting room quickly so I can stop letting people in and actually focus on what I'm talking about. Yeah, and this is clearly going to be a problem for white. But obviously this is on counterplay and we're not looking at quick tactics. And yeah, black has overlooked white's counterplay option. Queen takes h6, which is just very strong. Obviously now we see the threat of knight g5 is coming, and there's going to be lots of checkmating ideas. And it's kind of hard for black to stop that, right? Knight g5 is almost going to be checkmate. So black now needs to find a way to counterattack himself. Can anyone suggest a counterattacking move for black? Queen c3 check. I see in the chat that when are we talking about queen c3? I'm sorry, I'm not following when we're playing queen c3 check. Maybe were you not referring to queen g3 earlier? Because I guess e3 is here, and I'm trying to work out how queen c3 is ever coming there with check.
Yes, you wanted to say queen g3 earlier.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes a lot more sense. But okay, we're looking for a nice aggressive move for black here.
I'm still trying to see if I can make queen g3 work still in this position now.
This is interesting, and I think, I mean, we almost have to try and make it work, don't we? Because, I mean, knight g5, like, knight g5 is just game over. So we either need to stop knight g5 or we need to create a bigger threat, and that's exactly what queen g3 does. You do need to calculate queen g3. If you're playing this in an actual game, you don't just blitz out queen g3. But
yeah, queen g3 for black.
Queen g3, what's your idea if okay, let's start off taking the bishop with the queen.
Yeah, you can't really take it with the pawn.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult. I tried. So what do you want? Do you want to play queen takes f2?
Yes.
Okay, queen takes f2 if I taking h1.
King G7.
King g7. That's a really nice move. Really nice move. I think if you take the bishop, you're still running into problems with knight g5. But king g7, clearing the way for the rook to come to h8. It's definitely a grandmaster move, so well done on spotting that. And now we need to find what can white do to stir up counterplay. Because, okay, if he just sits here, rook h8 is coming, and that's going to be game over. So what are we doing? I'm just looking at the chat again. Bishop check. I presume that's suggesting taking on f2 with the bishop, which I don't think is quite as strong. Because if you take with the bishop, just king h1, I think. And okay, if you take the rook, how do I continue? Yeah, I can just take with play rook takes, and I'm going to have 2 pieces for a rook. And usually 2 pieces are a lot stronger than a rook in most positions. So I think taking with the queen is definitely the right way of doing it. And then this king g7 idea. But now we need again, remember at the start, Andrew was talking about how we need to see ideas for both sides. So this king g7 idea is brilliant that Duran spotted, but we need to find a way that now we need to see what white can do.
Knight H2.
You want to go knight h2. I'm worried knight h2 is a bit too passive. So okay, let's say knight h2. Have you thought what's happening if I just go rook h8? Are you wanting to go? What are you playing here?
Queen F3.
Yeah, queen f3 makes sense because we can trade queens.
But then the bishop hangs.
Yeah, I'm concerned. Yeah, I'm concerned about the bishop hanging. I'm concerned about something annoying like queen h5. There's a lot of problems here.
Rook takes knight.
Which position? After queen f3. Yeah, rook
rook
takes
takes
knight.
knight.
This guy's seeing tactics, eh?
Yes.
And rook h8, and that's crushing. But I mean, if it feels like white's in trouble. Like it doesn't. I don't think we need a concrete variation. We need to find it. Just get all our pieces in the game, and white should get mated basically. So we need a better move than knight h2. It's not working. See, Andrew does say is back, so after this game, I'll let him take over again.
Maybe bishop takes g6.
Bishop takes g6.
Bishop takes G6.
What's your plan if rook h8 still?
And bishop H. Oh,
Like, I mean, the first thing we need to consider of every move is if black can still play rook h8. And I think he can.
You can cover now with the bishop.
Okay, you want to go bishop a4. Okay, this is interesting.
Okay.
Okay, and this works, right? So the next question we need to ask is, what if I just take this? Because now, if you check, I can just block with the rook and the other rook swinging over.
Check.
If you check with the rook, looks a lot more
No rook
convincing.
check.
In which, this check, rook e7 like I played, right? I think this looks quite good. This is tricky. I'm trying to work out, what do people think about bishop g3? Are we missing something, or is it quite good?
I think we just have to continue with the original plan
Okay,
of rook h8.
Rook h8, bishop h5.
Then rook takes bishop.
That's nice, yes. Bishop h5, rook takes h5, and now if you take back, we get the same idea. And I think even though the material is close to balanced in this ending, it should be better for black, right? Because at least you can pick up these pawns at some point. Obviously, we don't want to hang the bishop to some skewer, but I think the queen is better than the 2 rooks here. Would be my evaluation. I like the idea. Bishop g6 is it's what we need, kind of. In the game, rook f1 was played, which I think is probably the right way of doing things. Because, okay, now we're just responding by threatening his queen. If queen takes c2, the idea is to go knight g5. And now there's a double. There's pressure, so rook h8 is stopped. White is fighting fire with fire. He's not trying to get passive, he's trying to get active and get as much counterplay as he can. Bishop f2 got played. Black is blocking the attack on the f-file, and again wanting to play rook h8. Both sides are fighting to get their idea to come first. And that's effectively what chess is. It's a battle of ideas, yours against your opponents, and you need to make sure yours wins out in the end. Queen h7, king f6, and queen h4. Now this is getting complicated. White is looking to exploit this pin. King is vulnerable on f6. There's threats of rook h8. It's very double-edged. Could go either way. And whoever calculates it most accurately is the one who'll probably win. But rook h8 still gets played. And it's not so clear. Now we need to find a brilliant move for white. Can we do it? Because
Knight h7 check.
knight h7 check is a double check, but I think is king
Rook
g7.
takes. Yeah, rook takes bishop. Rook takes.
Rook
Bishop.
Yeah, rook take. I think though, I just want to look at this idea first. I think just king g2 is quite strong. I think. I might be incorrect. I haven't analyzed this too deeply, but I think it works. Rook takes bishop, as was suggested. After queen takes f2, now this idea. So it's just combining ideas. So very nicely done. And this game ended very quickly after king g7, queen takes f2, rook takes h7, and okay, white has a queen, black is a rook. If there's one thing you can take away from this class, it's that queens are better than rooks. Okay.
Wait, can you go back?
Which position?
Knight check.
Knight h7, yeah.
What? Oh, it's double check.
Yeah, it's a double check.
I was wondering rook takes knight.
Yeah.
Double check.
If you could play, you do have to check these very carefully. These aren't tactics you can play in a bullet game, but yeah. Okay, is Mr. Talmarkes back here? I think he is.
Yes, I'm back.
Okay, awesome. Let me get my face out of here and remove this. I think you should be able to. Okay, there. You can take over when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Guys, just while I'm busy getting ready to share my screen. There's just in the chat been some comments there that we're having, and we do appreciate your participation, but we're having some random answers just coming up. So in order to be able to coordinate it better, there's a suggestion that you raise your hands somehow, and then the presenter will be able to coordinate things much better. Okay, so just try and hopefully that will bring about an improvement. Okay, can you guys see the screen that I'm sharing?
No, not yet.
Okay, thank you, Takutswa.
We see it now.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm just switching over to the next game. We're going to be looking at the game between Gregoric and Steyn. All right, so if you look at the current position, white has to play. White's first move was king to h1, which was considered to be a weak move. Is there anybody that wants to suggest a possible move for white? Anybody?
As we choose a move besides what?
Yeah, white is due to play. White played king h1. Is there any other possible move that you want to suggest besides the move that white had played? King h1 is considered to be a weak move.
Nicholas in the chat said G5.
G5 for white.
I'm assuming they mean G4,
G4. Okay.
but I don't like G4 because of knight to H3 check, picking up the rook.
Yes. Yes. Anybody that wants to comment about h4? Would you consider h4? It might give you an additional escape square for the king to h2. Okay, if you remember at the start of the presentation, I said that we go into long variations and we do not, sometimes we tend to overlook our opponent's initial response. So this game is one of those classical examples. Okay, I'm just going to make the notes available for you. White played king h1. Okay, white had a very good idea, but you'll see that white overlooked black's response. Okay, and because of that, king h1 ended up being a bad move. His idea was that he wanted to sacrifice the exchange and have an attack going down the G file, but he overlooked that first move. So what was suggested, the alternative is h4. All right, king h2, it's still not with certainty saying that that is going to be a good option to prepare for king h2. But if you had to go h4, the way it would have worked out is then that black will take on g2, then the king will go to h2, king h7 will follow, and rook to g1. And then white will somehow be able to redeem himself. Okay, because the rook will go to g8, and now after the doubling of the rooks, you can also see there's a bit of an exchange sacrifice that's going to be happening with the knight and the rook. But white didn't really have much of a choice because that knight is on an extremely strong outpost on f4. Okay, so then the bishop will go to f6, etc. But now let's just go back. After king h1, look at the surprise move for black, which was considered to be an excellent move. Queen takes f2. Any comment that you guys want to make on that?
Goes to queen takes queen. Pawn
Yeah.
takes g2 check. Pawn takes g2 check. King g1, knight h3 check. Oh.
Right. Now, if you guys think of what I said a few minutes ago, white had planned these variations and he wanted to have an attack going on the g file. Part of his plans was to have his queen on the board. Now with queen takes f2 by black, white did not take that into account. He did not count on the exchange of queens. Okay, so if we look rolling forward, after the exchange of queens, you can tell me who's going to have the better endgame. Okay, so there goes forcing the exchange, and now looking at that situation, black is a pawn up. Okay, let's just roll forward. Suddenly the rook becomes active, and who would you say who's got a better endgame now, white or black?
Black, definitely. is an up and exchange, and that knight on a4 is just sad.
Very sad. And moreover, in one of our previous lectures, we spoke about the fact that in the end game, we know that the rook is quite an important piece. Okay, and now black has got two rooks. Okay, it will actually work into black's favor if this knight on f5 chooses to exchange the bishop on g7. Okay. Any other comment? So now we can actually see that in the endgame, white has no compensation for the exchange. And what is important is the fact that he did not take into account the exchange of queens. So his most important attacking piece is actually off the board. Okay, and that's absolutely vital. All right, moving on. This is the next game between Miles and Yusupov. And in this game, you guys will actually see that in return for a pawn, white has dangerous attacking chances on the king side. However, you'll see that he underestimates black's counter attack. Okay, so this is where we're starting with our games relating to counter attacks. Queen f2 was played, but the better move for white to play was a3. All right, so black would then choose between playing king to g7, followed by knight going to g8 and b4. All right, so there's we're just starting off with some possible variations that can happen. I'm just going to go through if white starts off with bishop takes b5 and then the queen will go to a2. It's just like some heavy exchange of blows here. All right. But now just going back, let's assume white plays rook to g3. Why would that be bad? What could black possibly be playing?
Knight to e4.
Knight to e4. Yeah, very strong fork that can happen. What's the other option? There's a lot of play happening here on the queen side. So would you agree with me that trying to force the exchange of this bishop here? So like bishop a6, would that also be a good consideration?
Yeah, probably.
Okay, because they do comment on that. They say not knight because of the fact that bishop a6 could happen. Okay, so then this is the way it's going to work out. After the exchange there as well, and now just look at you decide for yourself who's now better off. Okay, again, black is a pawn up, but it is knight versus the bishop. So we could almost say at this stage, it might be a bit of an advantage, slight advantage for black. All right, so let's go back to this. Go back to the original position. The original position, black's first move is an excellent move of rook takes a2. They say black is starting a counter attack. I need you to comment on that. What do you think? What will black's plan be? What are the possible moves that you would want to suggest for black? Anybody? Do you think that black might want to double his rooks? I can tell you what bothers me is the fact that black has got this diagonal attacking there, but his knight is controlling there. However, after the exchange of the bishop takes on f6, this bishop on d3 could easily go to e4. So based upon what I said, any comment? Okay, no comment going. So black has just played rook takes a2. Next move for white. What do you suggest? Come guys, you guys were, I'm sure there's lots of ideas there. If you're playing white now, what will your next move be?
Bishop takes, knight at f.
Bishop takes knight on
Six.
f6. Yes. Okay.
Preparing to play bishop. White will be preparing to play bishop e4, attacking the queen, and the queen
Okay.
has no safe square to go to.
Correct. So you could possibly then plan to win the bishop on.
They win the
b7.
bishop.
Yes. Well done. Anybody else? Thank you for that.
I think queen to h4 is stronger.
Queen to
Because-
h4.
Yes, because in the previous variation, if the bishop takes the knight and the bishop takes, there is always a back rank problem if at all the queen is sacrificed for the bishop on e4.
Okay, excellent. Let me just show you what's going to happen with queen h4. They actually say that queen h4 was the better move in response to what white played. Okay, white ended up playing bishop to b1, but they say that the analysts say queen h4, then rook takes b2.
Clean, yes, bishop, rook captures on b2.
Then rook takes b2, then that move of bishop takes f6.
It's weak.
Bishop takes. There's somebody that needs to put their microphone on mute, please. Queen takes f6. Okay, how are we doing? Are we still? Oh, there's a piece up so far. All right. Queen comes back to a2. So now you can see the threat on g2. All right. Rook on the 7th rank as well. And then the bishop comes to f1. And look at this. Okay, so bishop takes f3. And then you see that black has a clear advantage. So well done on spotting that queen h4 move there. All right, so let me just open up the moves for you. So coming back after rook takes a2, the bishop went, which was a bit of a risky move. And then they say that the variation of queen h4 was much better. Okay, let's just see how the game continued. Rook went to a1, and there the queen h4 went a little bit later. Okay, and d3. What do you guys think about that move? Is it not just a wasted move?
No, it's opening up the diagonal to the king, I think.
Yes, yes, definitely. This
So,
one
so
here.
like bishop c5 is now a threat. Yes.
Correct, yes. So it is opening up that. Definitely, it's also kind of like, gaining a tempo. Definitely, there are 1, 2, 3, 3 attackers onto the d3 pawn, but it's more the point of bring the bishop to c5 because there's still a strong pin on of the knight on f6. Okay, so definitely there again that move, the d3, kickstarts the counter-attacking operation that we're talking about. You cannot just be on the defensive all the time. You need to come up with some type of plan. Okay, somehow you could almost say that's the help from above. Okay, black does not retreat his attack piece, but he prepares a counter strike. Okay, so the game continued, exchanging the bishops. Queen takes, and look at the next one after d3. Black is not prepared to just sit still. I need you guys to talk to me about the d2 move now. Would you have made that move?
Yeah, maybe. Because the idea is like after the rook moves, just rook takes b1, and then you just promote the pawn.
Absolutely. You could even rook takes bishop, rook takes rook, and then you promote the pawn. Taking into account the fact that the queen is already on the d file. Okay. Anybody else? Thanks, Rawan. Anybody else?
It's, hello. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can hear you.
Sure. If d2 ne, it was played,
Yes.
how about rook on d1? Is that bad?
Yeah.
Or followed by rook on d1? If let's say black plays a counter move, like let's say perhaps maybe I don't know. Let's say you play an ordinary move, maybe rook to d8. Let's say for instance rook to d8. If it happened that way, okay. If white must respond, I think white must respond by knight to g4 if I'm not mistaken. Then it's gonna be mate in one because I'm sure that's the following attack for white if he played that way. I don't know. And I think.
Okay, what do you think about the rook takes b1? Would you not consider rook takes b1 for black?
If he takes on b1, okay, checkmate is imminent. Yeah. Checkmate is imminent against it. Okay, rook captures on b2. Yeah.
B1, and then there's your queen. Exchanges, and now the rook is kind of
f1. Rook f1.
Forced to come back there, and then just queen c2.
Okay.
Okay, so now black is just a pawn up.
Knight to f3.
Okay. Would you say black is better off or white at this stage?
I cannot lie, but I think white is better off by playing knight to f3. But black will be a pawn up, yes.
Okay. Sorry, there's somebody in the background that you need to mute your microphone, please. All right. Thanks very much for that contribution. So at this stage, we say that black is much better off. He simply has to play neutral very carefully, and so as to neutralize his opponent's last practical chances. Let's look at how it followed. Knight came back to f3 because there was now the checkmate threat on g2 with the queen and the bishop. Okay, rook switches to the open file, and Just rolling forward. You find now that where black was defending earlier, now you see white is basically on the defense. Okay, this knight is tied down, he cannot move away because of the G2 threat. And the rook has also got to support here on F3, otherwise white ends up getting a double pawn. Okay, so just rolling forward, we said that black needs to play carefully. And now, is the time right to play to exchange queens? What do you guys think?
Well, I think black will be looking for an exchange of queens because he's up material.
Yep. Okay, anybody else want to comment on that?
Yeah, before we go to that position, I've actually been raising up my hand because make a comment on the move where it pushed the pawn, then the rook should have gone, is it a D8 or is it D1? Is it possible to move it?
D1.
Yeah, if you can move the position to that square.
It was there, rolling forward. It's there. Is that the position you wanted?
Okay. All right. No, it's fine. It's fine. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So I'm just going to roll a bit faster there. So we were asking the question about, is it ready to exchange queens? And so far the answer we got to is yes. Black has got the material advantage. So might as well simplify the game. And there we go. This pawn here, remember you're going to be attacking weaknesses. So this pawn on B2, you can already say that this weak pawn it's useless. It's an easy target. And now white's rook and his knight, but more so the rook will have to be tied down to defending that pawn. Okay. Meanwhile, let's see how the king enters into the game as well. Okay, the only thing is here is that black now took a gamble, and the F7 pawn is going to fall. Okay, but just look at this that attack there versus black's attack on G2. All right, very risky stuff. And there. So tit for tat. Black was prepared to take the chance because now suddenly you've got that pass pawn which actually commands the white rook's attention. All right, rolling forward. Okay, and that is just basically an intermediate move. Remember I said earlier, as part of your counter attack, you need to look for intermediate checks, some intermediate moves, look out for some kind of tactic that you can come up with. All right, and that's just basically to chase the king back. Very uncomfortable square that the king goes to. Remember in the endgame, you're going to try and centralize your king. So now that intermediate check, just chase the king back again into a corner. Okay, and knight c5, I'm just going to go a bit forward, and there you got the pin going, so very soon white ends up resigning. Okay, from here on in, there's nothing he could do. He's got this uncomfortable pin going there, he's got this pass pawn, and that's when white cried enough. Okay, any comments or questions about that, or can I move on to the next game? Okay, the next one, also still dealing with counterattack, is a game that was played in 1979. All right. Once again, we have our friend Yusupov, but this time he's playing black. I'm just going to roll to the start, the opening very quickly. If you look at it, the knight f6, anybody want to tell me what opening are we talking about here?
The Petrov.
Petrov defense, yes.
What I play.
Okay, now I know. All right, but somehow it did not work out to the Petrov because suddenly it turns into a 4 knights. Okay. Interestingly, you know, when I was preparing this game, I almost found it very funny because you guys are going to laugh now. As I play through these moves, you know, sometimes we see that our students start doing this, but these are grandmasters that are doing this. Just look how they're copying each other's moves. Bishop b5, bishop b4. At least up till the first 9 moves, they end up copying each other. This is quite funny. You guys see what's happening there? All right. You know, it's like they tell you, just check at that. Knight goes e2, knight e7. I just found it very, very surprising. So at that point, that's when they started deviating. You know, but it's quite funny to be seen to be making these moves. All right. So at this point, yeah, you can actually see that the positions are very, it's very symmetrical. It's exactly the same. Okay, it's like sitting in an exam room and copying each other's papers. Okay, so from here onwards, after bishop b3, Black makes a bit of a risky move. It's not considered to be the best, but we all know that he wants to prevent the pin on g5. Okay, let's just go forward. h3, again, they're copying each other. Okay, now, just coming back to the commentary. What if Black had to exchange e takes d4 and c takes d4? Followed by bishop to e6. Would you guys have liked that idea, or what do you think? Would that have been a good idea?
It could be.
Telling the pawn.
Sorry, I didn't catch the first part. I just want to take you back to bishop e6. Okay, like you said, it could be a good idea. Here, there's also the option of knight takes e4, but that might not have been such a good idea because of this variation. Suddenly you see the attack on f7 and e4. Okay, and your rook will be forced to come back to e7. And suddenly, next move, queen h5.
H5.
Okay, so just there again, I'm pointing that out. It's a straightforward move there of knight takes e4, but look at what happens at least 4 moves later. You find yourself in deep trouble. Okay, so let's go back. If it had to go to bishop e6, then that would have happened, and then your bishop on e6, suddenly you're also losing the tempo there. You're going to be forced to exchange on b3 with the queen also taking the queen d7 and f3. Okay, and then you find that white has a very strong kingside attack going. f5 is waiting as a very strong outpost. Okay, this bishop here is currently it is temporarily offside. It's not really attacking anything. And then after this bishop comes, you know, to e3 or yeah, just e3, then the rook is going to switch across to the e file as well. Okay, so there are strong possibilities for white. Okay, let's just look what happened after that. They were still copying each other. So bishop came to e6 and bishop to b6. If you had to play bishop to c7, then the exchange of e6 bishops would have happened. Okay? Let's say bishop goes to e6, then there you would have seen queen to b3, and white would have had the initiative. Okay? Attacking the b7 pawn and so forth. So these are things that we're going to consider all the time, players. You know, when we are busy working out our responses, we must move beyond just that single move response or that two move possible responses, but we're going to look at it a bit further, but you're also going to look at your opponent's immediate response. Your opponent is going to end up making those simple moves like we said. Okay, so let's just roll forward for the sake of time. You can see what happens here. What about that sacrifice? Do you guys think that that is a good sacrifice?
Yes.
Okay.
Might not be.
Okay, I'm saying yes, it might not be. So the comment says that white decides on a dangerous sacrifice. The intermediate move may be tempting, but black, okay, is not obliged to take the sacrifice.
Yeah, I wanted to say that like after bishop takes h6, black doesn't have to take the bishop. He can just continue with like d takes c3.
Correct. Okay, anybody else want to comment about this move, bishop takes?
Yeah, the bishop takes doesn't look very strong because the black's king is well protected with those two knights.
Yes, agree. Okay, any other comment? So white made the sacrifice wanting to win the game. The end result is that black ended up winning the game, and it is precisely that, players. When we make these moves, we need to determine, is it going to be a forced exchange or not? And like you guys correctly said, he is not forced to take. Okay, white was just calculating on black taking the bishop, accepting the sacrifice, and he forgot to figure out what the possible response is going to be. Okay, so at this stage, yeah, they are equal in pawns, but let's roll forward. Takes on c3, but what should have happened? More accurate would have been the d5 move. Okay, that would have created much more opportunity as well. e4 would have been under siege. This bishop here on b3 would have been cut off, etc. Okay, so he took there on c3, and now suddenly white is stuck with his isolated pawns. His whole queenside pawn structure is messed up. Okay, what if he had to take queen takes c3?
Yes.
Anybody? I'm going to close my answer.
Say.
Black to play.
Yes, queen captures on c3 is the best for me.
No, no, I think I should.
What's black going to do? It's an easy move. It's staring you guys in the face.
E5. E5.
Sorry?
E5.
G5.
No, knight. He's saying d5.
D5. No, I'm not happy with that.
What about knight takes e4 followed by g takes h6?
No, you guys are falling asleep on me. Let me show you an arrow.
A5. Bishop A5.
Ah, thank you very much. Look at this. Bishop A5. You guys are falling asleep there. Okay, well done. I thought I'm going to get that answer long ago already. Okay, so after D takes C3, there comes your D5 move. Counter strike begins. Black continues to ignore this bishop. Okay, and he attacks the knight on G3. Do you guys see what's going to happen here?
Yeah, bishop takes F2, and then with the knight is hanging.
Not even needed. The knight's already hanging because the pawn's pinned. You can just play
Yeah.
queen takes c3.
Yeah.
It's not needed.
Right.
Absolutely. Queen takes on G3. It's going to be a killer. Okay. So the D5 move is a bit of a deflection. It is cutting off this bishop. It's adding the pressure on E4. But moreover, here comes the counter strike. Okay.
Yeah, it's
So
devastating.
it's devastating, and this is what I was saying at the start, guys. We cannot just be defending, but we need to find a way to get back into this game. Okay, so E5 was played. White overestimates his attack. E takes D5, and I'm just rolling forward, and there's more exciting times happening. Bishops are exchanged. The bishop on H6, it is still not being captured. Okay, it's not forced to be taken, and there even the centers, the center pawns have also disappeared now. And finally, the bishop decides that needs to take on G7 as a way of compensation. Okay, let's just go back there. Exchange there, and now look at that pawn structure on the king side again. Now black has got a pawn majority on the queen side, but here he's got a single pawn against the double pawns. There's a passed pawn here, but it is a rook pawn as well. Okay, so threatening the checkmate there. So the queen goes to G3. And after that, you can actually decide for yourself. It is almost game over. All right. So in this example that we saw that white made a typical mistake. He counted only on the obvious moves. The obvious move was to take the bishop on H6. Okay. Such mistakes we are often found, and we end up attack a piece. And we simply think that it has to move away. We then capture a piece and we assume that the opponent will recapture. Okay, it's almost reflexive moves that we are playing, and we need to get out of those habits. Okay, perhaps you're playing too much blitz games, and that's where you make these reflexive moves, and you're expecting just a certain result. But often they lead to us not looking for the real alternatives. Remember, players, and this is my closing statement, that you need to look out for the candidate moves that your opponent can make. Okay, look out for those simple responses. You might have missed something and so forth, and do not take a certain response for granted. All right. Unfortunately, time has caught us. I do apologize for the technical problems that I've had on my side. There are also some more games related to the counterplay and counterattack and so forth, but hopefully we'll be able to get around them, get to those games in due course. Okay, thank you guys very much, and I wish you a good night further. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Okay. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, sir. Sir, can I ask something?
Yes, sure.
Thank you. See you guys.
Sir, will we having another classes again, or?
will we be having another class?
Class
Yeah.
meeting.
Sorry, I sent in the chat the link to our website. You can see all the scheduled lectures and that there.
Okay, sure, Michael.
Okay. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks for the session, Andrew. It was good. If
Okay,
there's
thank you.
no more questions, then we'll call it a night. Okay, it was great to see you all. I hope to see you again next week. Have a good evening, everyone.
Okay,
nice.
thank
See you
you,
guys.
Michael.
Thanks.
Bye.